God, Mark.
Hello, everyone. We're here.
Ah,
We're live. This is Dr. Politics and the Political Architect Show. I'm Ryan Nidek here with Dwight Patel, Jackie Saxton, Mark Ungerfer, Don Irvine, and special guest Jimmy Jaramello from Talbot County.
Hi.
So, first off, we want to wish everyone a happy Independence Day. I know tomorrow is actually Independence Day. Today's the day where all the federal employees get off from work in honor of Independence Day. And to celebrate that occasion, President Trump will be in Mount Rushmore tonight. Isn't that right, Don?
That is correct, and that has brought a lot of controversy. So part of this is that the National Park Service actually in 2010 outlawed basically any fireworks at Mount Rushmore. There were environmental concerns, the potential for fires and things like that. So there haven't been any fireworks since 2010. President Trump, being President Trump, asked for this to happen, and Governor Noem went along with that. There have been a lot of issues with that, or protests or whatever you want, complaints from the Democrats and the liberals. Part of it is that there were 7,500 tickets that were allotted, so there's not going to be supposed to be any social distancing apparently that'll be taking effect when you've got that many people out there. But the bigger thing, it feeds right into all of these national monuments and the statues and all the things that we've been going through for the last 3-4 weeks, is that it brought to the fore again Mount Rushmore, on native land, on tribal land. It should be removed or should be shut down. The DNC this week tweeted and then deleted something where they said they basically were promoting this Trump visit initially as he was going to promote white supremacy and all of this kind of thing, white nationalism, that kind of thing. Then the New York Times actually had a couple of reporters. They went and they wrote they had an article that talked about kind of the complicated legacy of Mount Rushmore and the presidents, talking about, Lincoln was a little bit too late for the Emancipation Proclamation. Teddy Roosevelt was a racist. George Washington and Jefferson were slave owners. So all of these things, which we have seen everywhere lately, it seems, Christopher Columbus, you name it, it doesn't seem like anybody is immune for a statue from this, that they're all being attacked.
well, here, I'm going to intercede, because here's my issue with all of that is, okay, yes, we're some of our founding fathers slave owners. Yes, are we judging people for the time period in which they grew up? Because you don't tell people who grew up in the 40s and 30s and whatever who were smokers that they were clearly had no regard for their health, because guess what? They didn't know that smoking could kill them or that it was bad for them. That's how I equate it.
In 40 years, are we going to judge kids today for vaping? Are we going to judge them for being
I judge kids for vaping now, but that's a separate
topic. Bad example.
I think, Jackie, the problem with your statement is it takes a lot of cognitive nuance that the Democrat Party of today doesn't seem to be capable of. And that was slavery a terrible thing? Absolutely. I mean, but at the time, it's one of the sins of our history, and it was a very prevalent thing. So does that make everyone who was involved in the founding of this country evil? Does that make? I mean, if you're going under that premise, and this entire country is evil, which really I think some of these people do believe. I mean, certain people within the Black Lives Matter movement crowd are saying that you shouldn't be celebrating Independence Day.
Yeah. So here's the point: is none of these people seems to understand that actually we are the greatest country in the world. We have saved the world from the empire. If it weren't for the United States, the empire would never have set on the Brits. Part of the Marshall Plan money was you had to get rid of your colonies. We kind of got suckered into a little war in Southeast Asia as a result of this whole stuff.
Look, something else.
This is exactly right. I mean, this is an attack not so much on the specifics of Abraham Lincoln, but it's an attack on American exceptionalism. It's the idea that the values of this country are which many Americans hold as being sort of what makes us American and what makes us different from the rest of the world.
I'll give you another example. I'm friends with somebody on Facebook who works on Broadway. He's a Black gay man, and he's one of those guys like I read on his wall that you're not doing enough to fight fight for the Black Lives Matter movement unless you're a white person willing to take a bullet for a Black person. But that gives you an idea of where he comes from. But he posted today about the fact that Hamilton is now going to be streaming on Disney Plus. Or are we just going to ignore the fact that this is a show about you know, like basically touting our founding fathers who are all slave owners, whatever. I'm like, this is a show celebrating our history, written by a Latino man, cast entirely of people of minorities and people of color. What is your complaint?
But Jackie, it's highly problematic. But really, they think what's problematic is America. So here's a solution that
can't win.
I think Dwight will be okay with. We need to start.
I think we need to take a step back and, you know, Jackie, you said we can't win. It's not about winning or losing. It's making sure that everybody's heard and that everybody's argument is heard. I'm not what makes this country great and why my family came here from Colombia was the fact that they knew that this was the land of opportunity. I don't know if it is still or not. And maybe we're not on the right track. And the Lord only knows. But here's where we need to take a step back and say, well, this is not about winning or losing. This is more about let's hear each other out.
100%.
There's no reason to yell, scream, you know, say hurtful things. It's just not. It doesn't help either side.
100%.
That's what we're missing now, and that's what used to make this country great. Where we could listen to different diverse issues, and that's the thing that I fell in love with politics when I started my first campaign.
And what you're saying about being heard, though, is like we're hearing so much about this cancel culture, whatever. That's frustrating a lot of Black people because that's all being like supported by the white people who are quote unquote woke. Oh, we're gonna take all of these racist characters off of cereal boxes or whatever, or Aunt Jemima and all that. When Black people are like, that's not what we're asking you to do. We are asking for police reform. We're asking for equality. We don't care about the symbolic changes that you're making because that's not what matters.
And who pushed police reform the first time ever? I believe his name is President Donald J. Trump. You know,
wasn't that
Kim Kardashian?
I don't know if you could say
I think
the first time ever,
Dwight. The president made it happen. You know,
Right.
All right, Don. Next topic.
No, I want to hear what Ryan was going to say earlier.
Yeah.
An amicable solution for Dwight is we really need to start putting
Ryan, we can't hear you.
Ryan,
You're on mute.
You muted yourself.
Oh, we need to start putting some modern, more modern, relevant figures like Ronald Reagan on Mount Rushmore to really balance out all those old people.
Well, that's a funny thing is that one of the things is that there was a discussion. Somebody had brought up, one of the Democrats had brought up that Barack Obama should be on Mount Rushmore, right? But they forget about that. They forget about the discussion about how, you know, this.
It should
but now,
be like
right now,
when
it's
they
a
used to
racist
add
monument.
states to the union, and where you have to
I'm sorry. What? Can we just go back? I'm sorry. What was that about Barack Obama? I missed that part.
That he should be on Mount Rushmore.
Okay.
So, but regardless of who they would want to change it to, logistically, how do you reform that mountain? Just saying.
Well, basically, it was a job.
I always thought it happened naturally. You mean it was?
It was a New Deal
jobs
program by FDR.
You mean it didn't just come down and it was just formed, right?
That's what I thought happened.
Actually,
all right.
Don, it was space aliens with laser beams. They just...
Okay. We have a lot of topics today, so
right.
Let's move on.
But here's a question I want to ask you. Just while we're kind of talking about Independence Day, 4th of July, is just that where we are. For those of you, I mean, we have various age groups here represented. Is this Independence Day unlike anything that you've experienced? Are we at a bigger inflection point, crisis point because of everything that's been going on, or is this just part of the norm? This is a cycle, and we're just going to get used to it.
This is just a cycle. It's Independence Day. We're most of us, for all intents we're still on lockdown. We're not back to life as normal. COVID-19, the boogeyman, which has been created by the liberal media, COVID-19, is still out there. The problem is, I don't think this is just a cycle. This is no different than Independence Day after 9/11. It is Independence Day. It's a great holiday. It should be a world holiday, quite frankly, because
no, I don't think that we should be celebrating our independence.
No. Jack,
well, growing up in Buffalo, I used to go to Canada on Independence Day.
Well, I got a funny story.
Because they have their Dominion Day on July 1st.
I want to hear what Jimmy has to say.
And I do want to revisit the comment about this is an unusual Independence Day, Dwight, where where families are not with their loved ones because of this disease that has been causing a lot of deaths. I mean, I'm in Rochester, New York, speaking to you guys live. I'm not in Maryland right now. And my aunt's a physician at one of the hospitals here. And I mean, it was really bad for a while. So when we hear things like this is a hoax, I'm
not saying it's a hoax.
Wait, I'm just saying, but when we hear things like that, it's kind of a little irritating that for the medical field, especially my aunt who busts her butt every day to see her patients, especially during this during this disease when it was really bad in April. I mean, can you imagine, seeing a lot of patients die? I mean, nurses and doctors are affected by this. So I think we definitely need to revisit the terminology around that when we're like, ooh, I don't know how really severe this is. No, it's
no one is downplaying its severeness, Jimmy, but here's the point. We need to move forward. We can't keep everything shut down.
No one's suggesting.
We have effective treatments for this now. We've made great leaps forward since February and March of this year. We can the hospital rate has gone down. The death rate has gone down.
In Maryland and New York, but they're rising in Florida and Arizona.
Yeah, Texas, there's a waiting list for ventilators now. And again, I think this is really serious. I think that the people who think that wearing a mask is impeding their freedom, quite frankly, just need to get over it and wear a mask. There are better hills to die on. That is not the one.
I think to kind of bring this conversation back in, part of the problem and why people have that mindset of, oh, this is blah, 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 this is BS, what have you, is that they feel that they did all this stuff. They sacrificed, in many cases, their business. I saw a statistic a few days ago, 1 in 4 restaurants could very well fail because of this. They sacrificed their livelihood. They stayed locked in their house for 4 months, 3 months, just to kind of arbitrarily decide, okay, now is when we're going to start doing things and opening up. And it just seems completely arbitrary, regardless of how you feel about the opening or not opening. Whereas if you had done more of a middle ground approach from the beginning, where you said 50% capacity, we're going to wear masks, take precautions, but didn't do a complete regressive shutdown where you told people they couldn't go out and make a living, and tried to do it in a more moderate and sustainable way, I think people would be much less frustrated right now.
Well, and let's pick up with what Jimmy was talking about New York State. Is we've learned a lot in New York where frankly, the state really dropped the ball in the way they handled the disease in nursing homes. Because the expectation, they were more afraid of what would happen with hospitals, and were trying to preserve resources there, and did it in a way that frankly allowed in many areas, in many specific homes, for the disease to get out of control. We've learned now what we didn't know in March, and are in a much better shape to be able to say, well, wait a second, maybe we can have a conversation about maybe people on beaches isn't quite such a bad thing because of what we know, and we also know what's available in terms of distancing and sunlight and what have you. We're able to make adjustments that we didn't do in March.
All right, so
I'm not sure. Yeah, go ahead, Don.
No, what I was going to try to do here in question, by bringing this thing up. I mean, like to Ryan, did the government, the state governments, did they approach this properly, in the sense that maybe what they should have done or could have done is talk to some of the businesses and have something there to discuss about what the effects would be and how to do this. It seems that a lot of this was somewhat unilateral. It was the state government officials with health officials, but no consideration for what the effect was going to be on businesses.
Here's my take on it. Hindsight's 20/20, first of all, but second of all, and I was talking to my dad about this, and his take is, we have seen this before. The issue between what changed between then and now is 24/7 news. But, and that's why it's so much more prevalent. 70,000 people a year still die from the flu. So but I think that the issue here is there was so much fear when this came, seeing what happened on the cruise and what was happening in China. And then all of a sudden it was here, and everyone's first thought is shut it all down because we don't know what we're up against.
Jackie, you're exactly right in that the response was driven by fear. And to kind of connect that back to Don's point, what that led to was an overbearing government response. I I did an investigative report in Georgia 2 weeks ago. I was suspended from the show for a week for going into a grocery store without a mask, but now I'm back, and I would like to report that, in Georgia, Governor Kemp got a lot of negative media on CNN and MSNBC for basically saying Georgia's not going to really issue any official restrictions. It's up to the businesses as to what they want to do. But actually being in Georgia and being in many different counties in Georgia, at least along the Atlantic coast, and seeing what it was like, a lot of businesses were implementing their own restrictions that were more strict than what you might see at a business in Montgomery County. So I think there's 2 points there. One, in Montgomery County, in places pretty much everywhere else in the country, especially liberal jurisdictions where the government is saying this is what you should do, people are just doing that because they think if it goes right, they have, okay, we followed the rules. And if it goes wrong, they have the cover of saying, I was just doing what the government told me was okay. Whereas in Georgia, businesses are making smart decisions based on their own individual circumstances. So sometimes that's less restrictive, as in like an outdoor dining type scenario, and sometimes it's more restrictive. The second point is that, the second point is that people's behavior is not necessarily tied directly to what the government response is. And that is true. I've read some articles about that this week, even in more mainstream sources like the New York Times, as in states like Maryland that are more restricted, not everyone's necessarily following those restrictions. So the people saying, oh, the spikes are because we're opening too early or et cetera, et cetera. I mean, that's not necessarily true. Even if I would Sorry, Jimmy, go ahead.
I would disagree. I would agree with your statement, but I would also disagree with, the critics saying the states aren't opening correctly. I mean, as you pointed out, some states never issued any kind or very, very issued very lenient restrictions.
Yep.
Our governor may not be the most popular governor on the shore right now, especially where the Republican base is in Maryland. But I can guarantee you, he saved lives with his restrictions. Where did they damage a lot of businesses? Yes, absolutely. Especially here in Talbot, where we depend on summer dollars. Especially a lot of businesses do. Ryan, you've been to some of the establishments when you came down a couple weeks ago, and you see that a lot of the out-of-towners go to these restaurants on the water, and they really depend. Now they're starting to open back up, and they're starting to feel this relief. But for a month or two, when I was meeting with business owners in Talbot and across the shore, they were really frustrated with the governor, and I totally understand that. But at the same time, the coronavirus could have been a lot worse in Maryland if we didn't act sooner, which I applaud the governor.
But Jimmy, let's go back and remember what the primary purpose for the shutdown was. It was not to stop Corona completely. I don't think there was not any.
I'm
not saying that.
I didn't say that. So what I'm saying is, let's go back and examine it, because I think it informs what we do going forward. It was to stop the pace at which it was doubling every 4 days, where there was a real prospect that by May or late April, we would completely exhaust our healthcare facilities. Right now, the spikes that we're seeing are really not consistent with that kind. Yes, they're kind of shortages, but because of, frankly, the composition of where the population that there is, that we're seeing the spikes are, we're not back where we were in March.
No, Maryland, I completely agree. We're not.
No, even in the other states as well. Certainly in Maryland, we're
I'm not sure about that when it comes to the ones we're seeing in the news, especially Arizona right now.
Texas, Florida, and Arizona are our outliers.
Exactly. I mean, and parts of California now are seeing an increase. And yes, California was very strict, but let's be honest, was Florida very strict?
No, I want to look at this.
In Texas, I don't think so either.
As a part-time Floridian, I'll tell you this: Floridians like their freedoms. They don't, and let me tell you, the fact is, most of these cases are coming from people from New York that are coming down to Florida to vacation and infecting everyone down there, frankly.
I mean, that
do we have any evidence for that? Yes, where do we get that?
There actually is.
Dwight, that very well could have been true initially, but that's not true. I mean, initially there was a real concern of people coming from New York, but that really didn't happen because they told people not to come.
But I wanna look at this from a more international perspective, because another piece of news we got this week, I believe it was this week, is that no one from the U.S. is going to be permitted to travel to the EU for the foreseeable future. So I want to get people's take on that as well.
Well, I mean, visit socialist Europe. Why bother? Frankly. That's my view on the EU. How about, can we also keep them from coming here too? Can we shut our borders?
We're just going to leave that.
Tourism is a major industry. Just going to keep that in the conversation.
Europeans, are they all racist for not letting Americans come there? They accuse us of being racist. We shut down immigration from those Arab countries back when we knew they were state sponsors of terrorists. They said they called us racist. We stopped.
I think we're getting a little off topic.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to ask. I did want to ask the one more question about the whole COVID-19 thing, though, or maybe kind of group one bunch of questions in here, which is on the bars and the beaches that reopened and now have closed in many states. Was that a mistake to open them in the beginning? Is herd immunity something that's a factor here? I mean, were the governments should they not have expected a spike in the cases when the close proximity of those things were happening? And if we have to go, if they're pausing, the reopening in these states, what's the effect going to be on the economy? Where are we going?
Okay, so I'm currently at the beach in New Jersey. I've been here for about a month now. And New Jersey is opening a lot slower than Maryland was. Governor Murphy, I can't remember the exact word he used, but he basically called the people in New Jersey idiots, and he said, basically, because you guys are such morons.
Remember when you guys used to have a kind governor like Chris Christie?
They're now they have now suspended the opening of indoor dining until further notice. It's supposed to be at 25% capacity because so many people were crowding outdoor bars and the beaches. And definitely I'm seeing it here. We went to a beach bar last weekend, and it was like the bar was 3 people deep. There was a ton of, no one was wearing a mask, no one was social distancing. So yeah, I think people are being, it was knuckleheads. That was the word he used. People are being knuckleheads. And, but you know what, at the end of the day, I think herd immunity is what we need to go for. I think Fauci said he said this is the worst nightmare, but he said only about 75% of people are going to achieve herd immunity. But you know what? We can't live in fear forever. At the end of the day, if you most of the people, they're saying more and more people around mine age and Ryan and Jimmy's age testing positive, but a positive test isn't a death wish. It's not a death warrant.
I hate people comparing it to the flu because it's not the flu, and that's a big piece of fake
that
news
being
at
said,
the beginning. But among younger people, and I'm talking like under 25 young, it's actually, it's not fatal at all. There's less fatalities from this than there is.
That being said, I think that the University of Alabama students who are having COVID parties in the way that I guess Mark and Dwight and Don, your generation, used to have chickenpox parties are idiots.
We never had.
That's completely.
I heard this from my mom, but those kids are idiots.
Mark and Don are a generation older than I am.
Okay.
I'm a Gen Xer.
But either way, if you're out there watching Alabama students, you're stupid.
So I do think we should move on, but I do want to.
I feel I was a little bit of ageism in there somewhere.
Yeah,
right.
We're going to tear your statue down now.
I just want to close this out by saying that, Jackie, I think your statement kind of plays into one of the original points I was trying to convey, which is that the overbearing government restrictions at first can lead to a kind of cat out of the bag effect once you open up of let's all rush to the bars and go pretty deep, where if we would have done the 25%, the 50% capacity from the beginning, the outdoor dining only, et cetera, what it may be based on the jurisdiction, and been more moderate from the beginning,
people will be less anxious to get out.
We would have been much better off. And we've been eating outdoors at Mama Lucia's for the past few weeks, and it's been fine, except for today when it was 101 degrees, and Chris still wanted to eat outdoors. But
it wasn't as bad as it could have been.
Okay, we should move on, Tom.
I want to bring. Okay, so I'm going to change the direction a little bit. I'm going to bring it back into the DC, the DMV area specifically, with the Washington Redskins, which is now apparently an evil thing to say, is the Washington Redskins. So there has been for years efforts to have the Redskins change their name.
Exactly.
It's been terrible, racist, all this kind of stuff.
Jack Kent Cooke days.
Right. And so now it looks like the pressure is starting to take hold, at least from the corporate level, because we had Nike, Pepsi, and then Federal Express, for which they sponsor. Their name is on the stadium, FedEx Field. They want the Redskins to explore this, and the Redskins apparently announced today that they are going to do a thorough review of this.
I would put money down that the Redskins' name is changing in the next.
Okay, hold on. Let me get you. You guys need there's a bit of a history lesson. I think there's a little bit of politics here.
You have 30 seconds.
These guys, no, it's my show. I can do whatever I want. They are the Boston Redskins, named after the Boston baked bean, which had a red skin. It has nothing to do with Native Americans, frankly.
That's why
mascot kind of throws that argument out.
And when Jack Kent Cooke, liberal, owned the Redskins, nobody gave a damn about this. Marion Barry, oh no, they're not going to change their name. Mumble, we're not going to change their name. It's the Redskins. It's honorary. And now those same basically, I'm not even a Redskins fan, frankly. I can't stand the Redskins. I think they're the most arrogant.
Don't tell Evan.
But Dwight, I think that's
why. Then why isn't the mascot a baked bean?
That's what I was saying. Is the solution changing the mascot to a giant baked bean?
That'd be kind of interesting.
Dwight,
you guys have it all wrong. It's really the Washington baked beans.
In whatever that was, Dwight does have somewhat of a point. It might be unintended, in that the same liberals going out and being upset about this now are kind of just doing it to virtue signal, right? Because a lot of them weren't upset about this 5 years ago, and it's the Aunt Jemima type effect, right? This is not what we should really be focusing on, but it's what the woke white liberals are focusing on.
Can I make an observation about the owner of the Redskins? I think he's got a huge business opportunity changing the name of the team, right? Because he's going to collect all that licensing revenue from the old Washington Redskins, right? Mm-hmm. And if he's smart, he's going to negotiate a deal with the league to make sure that he gets all the money, whatever. Plus, he's then going to be able to go out and collect all that licensing revenue for the new, whatever the hell Washington team it is.
Washington Baked Beans.
The Washington Baked Beans, or whatever the hell it is. And so he's going to get basically 2 sets of brand names, right? And so there'll be all those people. So they'll be able to sell to Dwight. Now, Dwight, I've never, ever seen Dwight with Washington Redskins paraphernalia on.
I'm not a Redskins fan. I do not.
He's not a Redskins fan, right?
I think
when they get forced to change the name to the Washington Wokes or whatever it is.
Washington Wokes.
Actually, they want to be. I think they should be the Washington Justice Warriors.
Dwight will be buying the old Redskins paraphernalia, and they'll be collecting money from that. And some other person will be buying the Washington Wokes paraphernalia, and they'll be laughing all the way to the bank.
All right, here's my comment here. Has anybody on this call watched Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt? Anybody? No. Okay, there's a whole season where the whole underlying thing is this woman who moved to New York from, I think she's from South Dakota or whatever. She was Native American. She then bleached her hair and it was blonde. It doesn't matter. So she was trying to win back her parents' affection by dating the son of the owner of the Washington Redskins and getting them to change their name. And in one of the episodes, what happened was she saw her parents at a protest. They were outside the owners' meeting burning Redskins jerseys. And she's like, what are you doing? Those jerseys are like $50, $75 a piece. You're just giving them money. They don't care what you do with it. So the solution in the end was, if you change the name to something that the white people hate, then, you get what you want, and they're going to start buying the jerseys and burning them. I think they changed the name to the Washington, we take your guns away or something like that.
But
I like that.
Mark has got a good point though, in terms of the licensing and things like this. Plus the fact is that, if Snyder, and I think Snyder is, for him right now, it's going to all be about the money, right? Yeah. It's all about the money. And so, if that happens, he's got an opportunity there. But think about also all of that merchandise. Say the NFL, would say you cannot put the NFL logo on anything that says Washington Redskins. If you own that trademark or whatever, you can do whatever you want with it. But there's no official NFL license, material that goes out there. But still, there will be people. I could see it happening on eBay or whatever. Just scarfing this stuff up and then trying to resell it at a markup because it becomes a collectible.
Here's my suggestion.
But Dan Snyder is gonna be cashing in on that old retro Washington.
Yeah, well,
I think
Dwight with Mississippi, they changed their flag. I went on eBay to buy a couple of Mississippi State flags as collector's item. You can't find them.
I think Dwight should buy the team, rename them the Washington Ag News, and that's going to be it.
No, Jackie, how could you?
All right, let's move on.
All right, so since we're on football, I want to go to this other thing here because I want to kind of get just this the opinions of the panel here. So the NFL apparently now is looking to, they're going to play what is called the NFL, the Black Anthem, Black National Anthem before the games in week 1. Now, it's interesting, actually, when I looked at the lyrics, I mean, it's kind of really more, it sounds more like a gospel thing about God and things like this. It's not necessarily a Black Lives Matter type of a thing like that. Is that the right thing for the NFL to do? Does the NFL think they were helping Black Lives Matter, but where they may actually be praising God, which is probably something the NFL didn't necessarily want to do. I mean,
I saw a conversation from two of our collective mutual friends on Facebook today that was basically saying, these white liberals are going to have a panic attack when they realize that by trying to be woke, they just brought a gospel song into every NFL game. And I think you're exactly right, Don.
Can you see the audience? Everybody in the stands would be doing this.
It's kind of ridiculous to say that we have a white national anthem and a black national anthem. Like, I thought that goes against everything that the civil rights era was supposed to be about, and that this country is supposed to be about, and that we're one America, and that we're all Americans, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I mean, if we're gonna do it, having them do something that they normally would be against, because if we said, we should have gospel.
Dwight so much he left the stream.
But Ryan, I mean, calling it like the Black National Anthem or whoever is saying that, I mean, is that not just in and of itself, I mean, a divisive type of thing to do?
It's like the same way that certain colleges are having having people of color only spaces, and it's self-segregation. It's absolutely It's the irony. They don't even understand the irony of what they're doing. They're protesting historical oppression by voluntarily doing the exact same. Like, what are you accomplishing by having a room on campus that only people of color are supposed to go to? That doesn't really seem like the America that Martin Luther King was envisioning. It really, we're kind of getting regressive on a lot of these race issues over the past 15 years, really my lifetime. And I think that's a bad thing for the country. And I think we're going to, a year ago, I would have said that we're going to see pushback against it eventually. But a lot of the people in a macro sense that I thought would push back against it are now kind of hopping on the Black Lives Matter bandwagon. So I really don't know. I think that's one of the most concerning long-term political issues for my lifetime, is that we're moving backwards on race relations. And it's bigger than George Floyd. It's bigger than Black Lives Matter. It's about this whole regressive attitude of, we had the civil rights era, we all started to come together, and now we're pushing each other apart.
Here are my comments on this.
I would disagree with that, and here's the reason why. I think race relations has never been has been a struggle forever. And was there improvement? Some people would argue that. I don't see there being.
You kidding me?
I've never seen it, and here's the reason why. I'm saying that is, when my family, I'll revert back to being a Latino male. I have lighter skin. You look at my father, my grandparents, they're much darker than I am, and they did experience racism in the 80s and 90s, and during the civil rights era. I mean, that was right. That was after, and they were still experiencing racism. So I don't think race relations have ever been a set topic or a set issue that's been solved.
No, Jimmy, I can see I see your point, but are there racist people out there? There always will be. I mean, my grandfather used to think, I'm lesser because I'm Polish, because they didn't like Catholic people. I mean, so it's always been a thing that's existed. But I think it's impossible to say that if you look at the 50s and you look the 50s to the 80s to today, that there hasn't been improvement over each of those increments, as to less of those racist incidents occurring. there will always be racist people in the micro. There will always be bigots in the micro. There will always be assholes in the micro. But in the macro sense, it's occurring less because society's views are changing and evolving and coming closer together.
And here's the thing, Ryan. I grew up in the 80s.
Yeah.
I grew up in the 90s. And let me tell you, race relations are not, people are making this actually a bigger deal than it really is. Let me tell you, if we're such a racist country, Barack Obama was elected twice. We've elected, I mean,
come on, you can't even use that.
Okay, can we go back to the main question, which was
wait, hold on. This needs to be talked about first, Jackie.
Why can't I use the fact that
you can't say because President Obama was elected, this isn't a racist country?
Look, you're gonna have bigots everywhere.
Jimmy, there was an expectation 12 years ago when he was elected.
Right.
There was an expectation and people beyond that, I mean, it was deeper than that it reflected a watershed moment. And it became part of his appeal. It became part of the appeal of having him elected president. It is also inconceivable to people who, like 30, 20, even 20 years before, that the same thing could have happened. And so there's been an evolution. There's been
I'm not arguing there hasn't been an evolution, but when Republicans use that argument as, we elected our first black president, come on, guys. We're better than that.
No. But listen, Jimmy, listen to what I actually said. There was an expectation in the broad society,
right,
that reflected a watershed moment in the history of our country.
And Jimmy, and on top of that, let me tell you, I remember when Jesse Jackson ran for president for the very first time in 1984, and I would have thought, I mean, he could have been white, and I still would have thought his ideas were nuttier than a nutty bar. But here's the point: Republicans have always been on the cutting edge of race. We're the good guys. We're the party of civil rights. We are the party that abolished Jim Crow. We integrated schools. We are the party of Abraham.
And I'm not arguing that. I know my history very well.
I see what Jimmy's coming from here, and I agree to an extent. It's the issue here isn't did we have a black president? Did we do things to make? But does that mean that we still don't have a ways to go? No, because we do. What I think that we need police reform, and I think that's what Jimmy's getting at here. There isn't fully equality amongst races, and I think that is something that
there's not full equality across LGBT or we're making a great strides like Justice Gorsuch. He wrote the opinion on saying, you can't be fired if you disclose that you're an LGBT member now. I mean, and who was he appointed by? President Trump. So we're making significant strides in not just race, but diversity in general. And diversity just doesn't own race. It owns what gender class you're part of, what social class you're part of. Religion, what sex you prefer, etc. So the major and kind of why I'm speaking out is we can't keep using President Obama as we hired our first black president. We've made strides where race doesn't really exist anymore. No, it's still a very serious issue. Diversity is still a very serious issue with all different.
Okay, Jimmy, let's look at. There are other metrics that we can look at if you don't want to use that one of employment of the progress that as a society or as a country that we've
Mark,
made.
He's not arguing that we haven't.
I'm not arguing.
No. But so so the Obama, that was one of those yardsticks. Now, I guess here's what I'm reacting to is it's a mistake to say that, well, because we haven't reached an end point, we haven't made more progress. I think you got to take a look at the progress that has been made as a society compared to where we were in 1954, compared to where we were in 1964, to compare the employment opportunities as measured by success in employment. But then, and then address what are the real problems as opposed to simply saying, wait a second, you're saying we've made progress. We haven't made enough progress. Therefore, we're going to ignore what we've done as a society.
No, I think we're all saying the same thing, which is yes, we've made progress, and yes, we also have a ways to go. And I think we all agree on both of those things. And it's also like 22, and we have like a ton of other topics.
I agree with Jackie. We've just to kind of close it out, because I started this. I think that we all agree. I mean, with the core idea, we kind of have different semantics in the argument. My original point that kind of sparked this was more that, do we still have a ways to go? Yes, but I think that the antics that are antics is a bad word to use. The way at which we're moving is no longer always productive, and some things that we're seeing, especially really in the extremes, it's creeping into the mainstream very gradually, is counterproductive. And it would be such a shame to have a movement be hijacked by people who are really trying to use it to push an extreme political agenda, as opposed to try to continue to move forward and make progress on having better race
back to the original question with the anthem, I think that this is the NFL pandering to Black viewers. I think that they know that you know, the good all, if that's his name, right? I don't watch football. The NFL whatever spokesperson's original statement about the kneeling and everything is going to drive.
Jackie, you're the one who brought up Aunt Jemima originally. It's not the NFL pandering to Black viewers. It's the NFL pandering to the white liberals that want to think that they're helping.
Yeah,
that's what it is.
I think that they know that they've isolated so many of the non-woke folk that now they feel like they need to pander to the woke folk. And that's all I'm going to say on that, because I don't watch football.
All right. So now the next question I have, or the issue I have here, topic, is this thing that's going up in New York, right? Okay. So we have New York, there's a Trump Tower. They're going to paint Black Lives Matter on the streets in front of Trump Tower. President Trump got all upset about this, and he tweeted about this to the extent that he basically called Black Lives Matter a symbol of hate. But he was also using it in the broader context of, the reaction also came right after the city council of New York had voted to defund the police by $1 billion. And that wasn't enough for the progressive left, right? They wanted even more than that. So was President Trump correct in reacting that way on that? Or, does it go somewhat to Ryan's point of, we have two sides here, we have these activist types, in New York saying, okay, we're going to paint Black Lives Matter. It doesn't really mean anything. They're not, it's just, they're just doing that. And then Trump reacting, and then now injecting by calling them, a symbol of hate, which doesn't probably help the discussion for a lot of people.
I think you've got a really good point. Let's bring it back. My final statement on the other thing, which I think relates directly here, which is causes that everyone should support being hijacked by extremist political movements. At a surface level, the phrase Black Lives Matter shouldn't really be a controversial statement, but when you have the Black Lives Matter official website saying that part of their platform is abolishing the nuclear family and supporting liberation for Palestine, that's no longer about Black Lives Matter. That's about a whole lot of that's a very far left utopian political vision that it's like pork barrel legislation in Washington. Or not really pork barrel, but it's like poison pill for legislation. You're stuffing a bunch of stuff in there that makes it so people can't support it. So
right, that's exactly where I was going to go with it. And I've said this before, is the reason that I could never get behind the movement Black Lives Matter is because their mission statements as an organization are inherently anti-Semitic, and that doesn't sit well with me. So those people who are saying, if you are not comfortable saying the phrase Black Lives Matter, then you're a racist, is simply untrue, because unfortunately the domestic terrorists that run Black Lives Matter, they have tainted that statement for what it's supposed to really be about.
And what's wrong with all lives matters, first of all, and going back to Don's point about planting Black Lives Matters in front of Trump House, honestly, my 2 cents is the president should have ignored it, quite frankly.
He should ignore a lot of things that he doesn't, but that's
Yeah, just because it's like Muriel Bowser. She painted Black Lives Matter. First of all, when things open up, 16th Street's going to be open, and that paint's going to be gone in about as soon as car traffic and all that. Here's the thing. They're doing this just to poke the president, and the president's reacting. The president should just not react to this stuff, I think.
So can I bring this? Can I bring this more local for a second?
Yeah.
Because did you guys see what they're going to be painting in Annapolis, which is the giant mural of Breonna Taylor that says Black Lives Matter?
I did not see that.
Yeah, I saw that.
All right. So
well, I think Jimmy had a point.
Okay, Jimmy, go ahead.
So obviously, that chunk of budget that's being removed, is about 484 million, out of their $6 billion budget of the NYPD. And what's concerning is they have to cancel the 1,200 people class of next year. That's scheduled for October, and that's rather concerning, because now it's like, oh my goodness, all these recruits that were depending on jobs, and some of these recruits are pretty good. Do we have a way? Do we defund the police? Absolutely not. But do we need to talk about diversity training for everybody? Yes. I mean, that is a touchy subject again. But at the same time, the president should respond with certain stuff, Dwight. I think he should respond to the issues at hand here, because he is the commander in chief. But at the same time,
where he's reacting to a mural painted.
Hear me out real quick. When he starts tweeting about Black Lives Matter being a terrorist organization or domestic terrorist organization or symbol of hate, come on, like, he shouldn't be tweeting that. Like, again, that's where I opened my statement by saying, God, what happened to people hearing each other out? And yes, they do say some controversial stuff. I completely agree. But at the same time, so do a whole bunch of other organizations that I know that say a whole bunch of other completely outrageous stuff. So it's a point of the president needs to stay above the fray, and sometimes he doesn't.
Well, I think part of the problem, to Dwight's point, I think you and Dwight are really in agreement on that, and that tweeting about a mural is not above the fray. I think it's a little disappointing, just because the Republican Party has so many people that are doing a lot of great stuff on these issues. Tim Scott, Rand Paul, et cetera, that we could really be highlighting and helping the president direct a message.
But is he?
As a supporter of President Trump, I really hope that he continues to listen to those voices, which he has sometimes, but just can stay focused on that message of this is what the Republican Party is doing.
And I think as a party, we need to work on finding strong Black Republican leadership and getting them into office. And I think that we can do that party of change.
Jackie, I think as a party, we need to find strong, good Republicans, period. We are the Republican Party. We're the party of tax cuts and tax reform, national security, national defense, and family values. That is the Republican Party.
Agreed.
We should not pander to any specific group.
She's not saying let's pander to people.
We're not. But let's come back and talk about the specifics.
We need to diversify the party, whether it's bringing LGBT, Latinos, or other organizations or other cultures into the Republican Party. So I wouldn't call it pandering. Actually, I do find that a little.
We're not. I mean, if you
but you're defining it. I'm sorry,
Mark, go ahead.
Yeah, you're defining it in identity terms, and I think that's part of what is really missing the whole equation.
But the word pandering.
Let me finish. Okay, let me finish. So in the conversation about police reform, it's not the identity of the people. It's about how you run the police force. It's about, for example, in Maryland, I would argue that one of the issues that we've got is that when a police officer is found to be wrong, that information can't get disclosed. And it was so fascinating that a Democratic legislator who was working for the big G, the local 1994 of the Food and Commercial Workers, which is the major union, he says that he was fired from his job from the union when he sponsored legislation that would have required for that kind of disclosure to take place. It was fascinating. This came out in the New York Times. It came out eventually in the Baltimore Sun. Was not well covered. Let's have a conversation not about what the identity is of the candidates, but let's have a conversation about the specific issues of police reform.
Right, but when I hear someone say, "Oh, the Republicans shouldn't pander to get different people of different sex, different
Jimmy,
different communities in general," that worries me about.
No, but Jimmy, you've been to the state party convention. We in Maryland, and I've been to many state party conventions around the country. We are not a whites-only party. I see Asians there. I see blacks there. I see all the colors of the rainbow.
Right, I see you here.
Exactly, and I've been here a long time.
And as a Latino male, I completely understand. But what I'm saying is, when I hear let's not pander, that's like, come on, guys, like we're better than that.
No, it's just like
a Republican or a moderate Republican. We're, again, a Big Ten party, and I think that's what we need to address.
Yes, we are, but we're also the party. We're not. And here's the thing: my issue is, I've heard this after Mitt Romney lost. I was at one of our state party conventions in Ocean City. I saw some people put up all these signs saying, when we talk about family values, we lose elections, except 1968, 72, 80, 84, 88, 2000, and 2004. We won those elections. We talked about the 3 times.
I think we're talking past each other, because we're, I think, in agreement that we want to talk about issues.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what it ultimately should be about. You shouldn't be voting on a candidate. And then that's my issue with the VP thing, that they're picking the most qualified Black woman, not the most qualified vice president. We should be voting on people based on who is most qualified, regardless of, gender, sexuality. I don't care. We should be voting based off of their stances on issues.
And a brief history. The great state of Maryland, voters had the opportunity to elect one of the first Black U.S. senators, but they decided to vote for Barbara Mikulski over Alan Keyes. Alan Keyes ran for United States Senate as a Republican from the great state of Maryland, as did Alex Haley many years before that as a Republican from Maryland. And he basically lost the
They had the opportunity to vote for Tony Campbell. I mean, there's a lot of examples.
Yeah, so,
all right, well, I want to squeeze one more topic in. We're
going to try to squeeze one more topic in, and we'll talk a little bit about the 2020 election real briefly before we get to our final comments. So one of the interesting things that happened this week, too, was that a group of former administration people have come together and formed a group for Joe Biden, that they're going to vote for Joe Biden. What I thought was interesting about this was just that, they stated that they were not saying that they agree with Joe Biden's policies per se, but it's basically an anti-Trump group, right? I mean, when it boils down to.
Do these Bush people have amnesia? Have they forgotten terrorist, Hitler, Bushler? They've called him a war criminal. Bush lied. People died. I mean, that was Joe Biden and his people. If Joe Biden had his way, we'd have 3 despots running. Iraq would be 3 different countries that would be run by pseudo-despot dictators. And now they're supporting Joe Biden. These Bush people need to understand if Jeb Bush were the president right now, the headlines where they say President Trump, they just take Trump out and put Bush in. That's exactly what they do, because that is what the Democrat Party is. Only good Republican is a dead Republican, or a Republican that basically is not in power.
Okay.
Yeah, that's inappropriate, obviously, for any political discussion.
Here's my take on here's my take on this. Everybody has a right to vote for who they want to vote for.
Yeah.
And I think and I've said this before, President Trump is not a Republican. And people are going to vote for who they agree with or disagree with, and that's their prerogative. Whether they don't have to agree with them just because they're their party's nominee. And that's my take on that. If they want to form Bushies for Biden, that's on them. And I have no issue with it, because every person in America above the age of 18 has a right to vote for who they want to vote for.
Exactly, and that's what makes this country great. Yes. Where we can submit something to the ballot box. But again, it gets back to my discussion of, we've missed that political leverage where we can have a comfortable conversation. So when I hear something like the best Democrats are dead Democrats.
No, I said best to a Democrat, a best Republican is a dead Republican. They only say nice things about Republicans after they die, unless it's President Reagan.
I must have heard a completely different thing, or you must have said it wrong.
Nope.
But
no, that's
still
what,
very concerned.
That's what he said, Jimmy.
That is what he
did
said.
say that.
Yes.
He did say that. Let me ask you this, though, in terms of all this. I mentioned this last week, but then Karl Rove actually wrote an op-ed piece in the Wall Street Journal talking about, and Rove has been very much defending Trump and promoting Trump, but he wrote a column here that went to something I was addressing last week. It's like, what is the message that Trump is trying to sell the voters in 2020? And he said that, if he really can't, find something, he says the voters will not give him another term. And this is a question I've been trying to ask a lot of people in terms of, what is the message? We had Make America Great Again. We had, build the wall and all of these types of things. But, it seems that every time Trump is being asked this question about what's going on here, he is basically going back to those things and talking about some things that they've done, but he's not really giving the voters something that says, yeah, that's it. This is why I'm going to vote for you.
I think we talked about this a little bit last week. I think that the message is still Make America Great Again, because we went through everything with COVID and the downturn in the economy as a result, and now it's going on with the Black Lives Matter movement. The message is we still need to work to make America great, and if you reelect me, that's what we're going to do, because I did it for the first 4 years, then COVID hit, and I can do it again.
And
I think the message that the president needs to adopt is not that platform that the RNC chairwoman passed. I think he quickly wanted. He was very frustrated with her, and I think in order to, since we're talking about finding messaging right now, I really think that coming up with a new platform that shows how diverse the party is, I think is key in making sure that we're going to be successful.
I think it's very simple. What the president should focus on after the election is, or not as the election, during the election is what I meant to say. Freudian slip. But it's that, who do you trust more to bring this economy back? Very much to Jackie's point, Make America Great Again. This is very much a low point in a lot of ways. I mean, the fact that we're celebrating 11% unemployment as a good number really shows you how far we've sunk as a result of COVID. And that's not anyone's fault politically, I think, in terms of the economic damage. I mean, it was inherent just because of the virus. But who do you trust to bring it back? Do you trust Joe Biden, or do you trust Donald Trump? And that needs to be the message. And they need to show why Republican policies, why the free market, why individual liberty and empowering individuals will help this economy come roaring back. And that needs to be the message going into November.
All right, well, it's 5 minutes to the top of the hour, so you do need to get to final thoughts because there's, full 6 people. So, Don, you want to start us off tonight?
Yeah, okay. So my thought will just be Parler, which has become the big thing now. It's growing like a weed. I went ahead and signed up for it. I haven't done a single thing with it, but I guess others have jumped on there. I don't know. I mean, that's why I need guys like Ryan to say, or Dwight even. It's like, is there really any value in Parler for the rest of us at this point?
So what's your handle, Don? So we can all
just Don Irvine.
Don, the first thing you should do is go and follow the Montgomery County Republican Club.
Did we join Parler?
We did. Okay. Shameless plug.
Yeah.
And that's at any of our social medias, Moco GOP Club, Twitter.
Yes, we're
Facebook.
synchronized.
All right, so that's I'm going to check that off tonight.
Okay.
All right.
On Instagram too.
Jimmy, final thought.
So this has been a very interesting conversation. As you can see, I don't agree with some of the stuff going on, but at the same time, I as a Republican, I am proud of the direction that some issues we're taking a stance on. Other issues I think we need to develop more, and especially with our platform that we lazily adopted again this year, and instead of really starting to develop it as the president suggested. But I do think there is room to grow in race relations and diversifying the party in general.
All right, Mark.
I'm just going to comment with Jimmy. I mean, regarding the platform issue, part of the problem is because of COVID, we the party are not able to have the same process that we normally have with conventions.
I'm aware, but
that process involves having representatives from all the states participating on a regular basis. That's not possible in this convention, and as a result, not just the platform committee, but the rules committee will not be meeting in that period beforehand. And there's not then also the process to be able to have a convention where you approve that process. So I got to say that it's kind of a cheap shot in my mind to say, well, gee, we're not changing the platform from what it was 4 years ago. When
not my shot, the president's shot.
When the reason, I understand that. When the reason for that is this inability to go through the normal processes for a convention. But very quickly, let me just do a shameless shout out to Don. You can follow or like on Parler or on our Facebook page or on the Duck Pin. I did a piece today on Mark Elrich's chief administrative officer, guy makes $280,000, was dinged. He was found to be in violation of the county ethics rules because of a business arrangement that he had with a vendor that he brought in to work for the county when he was part of the transition process. And he has been fined $5,000. Mark Elrich still has been quiet about that. He said he was going to wait to let the ethics process go forward, but he hasn't really spoken up yet. Unfortunately, basically, this guy who was a budget official in Baltimore brought Baltimore-style government down to Montgomery County. That is, getting a book to enrich yourself while you're working for the government.
Is Montgomery College going to buy his books also?
Well,
right. We don't have time to go into
about 100 books to county officials who wanted to find out what the right way to do it was. That was one of the issues that came up.
All right, Ryan.
Okay, well, one thing that I want to talk about is when I was doing my investigative reporting in Georgia, my parents who were with me down at our place realized, oh, gee, Montgomery County probably won't have school. So they went and they've been thinking about becoming snowbirds for a while, and this kind of accelerated their purchasing process by a year or two, and they bought a house in Florida. And I just want to point out the hypocrisy that MCPS loves to preach about equity and how they're bringing equal opportunity for all, when they're the ones so hesitant to even look at options that involve reopening schools, to the point where only Marcus was just talking about a friend of his rented a house in Hagerstown and did a very similar thing. It should not... They've created the scenario where having your kids go to school in person for the fall is reserved for the wealthy and elites, and that is not in line with the equity message they put. And, as someone who is repeatedly belittled during my time in Montgomery County Public Schools by members of the central office and the Board of Education for supposedly not being behind their equity agenda, even though we're going to leave that where it is. But, the fact that I supposedly have to point this out to them should really just make them upset and have them think and reevaluate that they're not being very equitable here. Most people don't have that option. So they're really, they're going against all of their supposed values here. And I think they should take a look at that, or at least keep that in mind when they have these conversations.
Agreed. Dwight, speed mode.
Yes. Okay. My final thought is on statues destruction and my beloved George Washington University. They knocked over George's head, the one that was sitting over.
It was pretty tragic.
Marvin Center. And I hate to say it as an alum, I think it's just a matter of time before GW.
We're going to be the Hippos.
Name. I think they're going to change their name. It'll be Hippo University.
Oh God.
Or maybe HIPAA University.
As long as that's not on my diploma.
You can make it Lin-Manuel Miranda University.
As long as it's not UDC. Right. District of Columbia University or University of District of Columbia.
My final thought, and I'm sure we'll get more of a chance to talk about this next week as more information comes out, is that Jeffrey Epstein's girlfriend was arrested, and hopefully they do a better job. I have no idea, but we're going to find out.
Somebody said she's suicidal.
I think hopefully she doesn't suspiciously die of COVID-19 in the next few weeks.
I don't think they can off both of them. It would be too suspicious.
It would be interesting to see what information comes to light, because I've heard that she has a lot of things to say.
Hey, so did Ron Brown, too.
The one thing I will say on that, to make us run even more over, is that I was watching the news today, and it's really, you say, oh, they did a bad job. It is a very hard case to prosecute, just because one thing about being super rich is you can do a good job of covering your tracks to the point where it becomes a he
said. That's Senator Menendez.
Let me preface this with, I have no doubt that any of the victims' stories, they have utmost credibility in my mind, but you create a he said, she said scenario where in front of a jury it becomes a lot more difficult to prove beyond a reasonable doubt, and you can tear apart, as a defense, you can tear that apart much easier, especially when you have access to the best lawyer.
There is your tease for when we talk about this more next week, but it is after 8. So thank you everybody for watching. Have a great Independence Day, and we'll see you next week.
All right, see you guys.